Hello and welcome to the Irish Marketing Podcast powered by IMJ and Tin Pot Productions. And on today's podcast, we are kicking off our summer series focused on some of the creative people working in and around the Irish communications industry. So we put the call out. Plenty of people came back with their recommendations for people who they thought I should interview. One of those recommendations was Nick Kelly, and Nick himself would say he likes to talk. So we're going to split this into two fascinating parts. On today's podcast, as you'll hear, we're covering a career that encapsulates a lot of elements, including training to become a qualified solicitor, then into a music career in the mid-80s with The Fat Lady Sings, then work in advertising, working on arguably some of the most iconic Guinness campaigns. There was work for Barry's Tea, Aer Lingus, loads of others. I think what's very interesting about our conversation is that crossover between what you might call commercial or communications creative and other types of creative or art, be they music or film. And Nick really gets into how all of these separate elements can be kind of beneficial in combination. Some of the things we'll cover in part one: how Nick got his first big break in Adland.
Rona Blake, she said, "Mal, I've got this amazing man sitting right in front of me, and you are an effing idiot if you don't hire him."
And then what might have been his second big break.
And I was on a shoot for Tom Crean, another Guinness ad, where I said to the line producer, "I'd love to try directing someday." And he said, "Get me a script by next Wednesday."
Nick also talks about at least one of his superpowers.
I mean, I think my absolute superpower is rejection. Actually, I've had so much rejection in my life, I literally don't even notice it.
So let's get into it. Nick Kelly, part one, summer series. Here's how it went. So Nick Kelly, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
So let me, I suppose, begin by just kind of giving an idea of what we're doing across the summer, because this will probably be the first in this series that'll go out. So typically, as I'd mentioned when we spoke previously on the podcast, we'll do anything around marketing, and it might be topical, it might be related to a campaign, it might be related to something that happened that week or an event. I guess what we're trying to do over the summer, because there's less happening in the industry generally and people are away, is just do a series where we're focusing on creatives in the industry and the work that they've done and their perspective on the work and that kind of thing. And rather than pick the people myself, what I wanted to do was speak to people in the industry and say, look, who do you regard? Who do you highly regard? Who are the kind of people that you think are exceptional in their field? So we put out the call to a number of different people. And one of the people that came back to us was Una Herlihy from the Indie List. And without hesitation, she said Nick Kelly, morning, noon and night. So that's why we are seated here. I'm sure if I waited longer, there'd be other people came back with the same name as well. So I guess I just want to talk about, I suppose, your, multifaceted creative career. And the first thing I'm interested in, as I look at your website, I suppose there's three areas generally that you're covering, which is film, music and creative. And the first thing I'm wondering is, when you say film, music and creative, in which order? In other words, is that in order of preference, in order of priority? Do you see one as being, more prominent or more prominent at different periods of your career, or is it just a mix of all the three? And we will talk about them individually. Yeah. But I'm just interested to know
it's a really good question. And it's a question I think about. Like, my Insta handle is Nick Kelly Movie Music Musings. And in terms of the amount of brain space and sweat that I spend in any given week, it probably is in that order, in the sense that a huge amount of my life is spent, making films, but also trying to make films, which is, most of making films is not making films. Most of making films is trying to maneuver yourself into position where you can trick a whole series of different people simultaneously to allow you to make a film. And an awful lot of my life is spent working on that. Music is also a thing I've always done. And the first thing I did was music, really, after I qualified as a solicitor and gave up that day.
How long did it take you to qualify?
It took me 3 years of a degree and 3 years in Blackhole Place and apprenticing with McCann Fitzgerald. There's a sort of a big panel of different dials. And there's definitely one, in my head anyway, which has two axes, and one is caution and one is curious. And I reckon if your dial is more than about 30% out of cautious into curious, you are not the sort of person who really should be allowed to make people's wills or buy and sell their houses, because you'll have an interesting idea. You'll wonder what would happen if you tried it a different way. So
do you think you could have been a solicitor though?
No, I mean, I really.
If push came to shove, could you have done it? Or was it?
Well, I think I would have been. I think I would have been quite miserable being one, but I also think I would have been really bad, because I actually think your job is almost to be seeing around corners for problems, and my instinct in life is to see around corners for opportunities, and I think that that's a really different way of looking at the world, and the things that you throw yourself into are the opposite of being careful. They are taking a total whirl on something and see what happens. And as a creative person, I think we're much too ready to allow science to be applied, and people write these rationales for that stuff. Most of your great ideas are just you farting around, and some weird thing starts to connect to another weird thing in an interesting way for you. It's utter accident. And as an artist, very often you don't understand what that accident is until years later. But that curious stubbing your toe on two things that connect together, that is the foundation of the thing that cuts through and is noticed. So I think the chaos, the unplanned, the visceral element of creativity, we don't talk about it because you can't analyze it. And if you can't analyze it, probably you can't charge for it. But, I've worked on a pitch where in the first 30 seconds of the research thing, it was for Irish Ferries, and we were going to do an away day on the Holyhead, Dublin to Holyhead line, and I went on with the account handler and the art director, and as I walked on the gangplank, I said, "Did you ever notice that the acronym for Irish Ferries is the word for possibility?" And 3 weeks later of things, that was the campaign. If as a freelancer, probably should never say those things, because, they could honestly have said, "Listen, Nick, you don't need to come on the boat. Hang out with that hour. We'll call it the full hour."
Yeah, you can bill us for an hour.
So and then I've, I'm sorry to say the other thing, which is, I've spent weeks and weeks with other incredibly brilliant creative people trying to crack an idea that is stubbornly not getting cracked. And, I think it is mainly about time and brain space and sort of not fear. I think that's a really big thing actually for ideas, but they're not predictable where the good ones come from.
So you started briefly as a solicitor, the curiosity kind of won over, and curiosity brought you to music in the first instance, and that would have been Fat Lady Sings. So
yeah,
that was the first band in the 80s.
Yeah, what happened was I was dying of boredom as a solicitor's apprentice. I had a great time actually, McCann Fitzgerald, can I say? But my heart wasn't really in it. But I met lots of lovely people who are still my really good friends, and in fact, I've worked on communications with McCann Fitzgerald for many years. And it's completely, way after all of that. So, it was a really lovely time in my life, but I kind of knew that it wasn't right for me. And during the time I was there, you could spend 6 months of your 3 years in another jurisdiction. And a lot of people went off and did stages in Brussels or in the European institutions or legal systems. And through a series of bizarre coincidences and, I'm going to say, quite serious lack of judgment on the part of at least one or two very eminent American lawyers, I got a placement in literally the poshest law firm on Wall Street for 6 months, Cravat, Swain and Moore. And I was being paid 10 times what I was being paid in Dublin.
Wow.
And I just had by far the most exciting 6 months of my life because, I'd finish I reckoned if you got in at 9 and you took your lunch, and most days you could finish at 5, but there was enormous amounts of performative staying all night and, ordering dinner on the client and ordering taxis on the client and ordering underwear and shirts from Brooks Brothers on the client. Like it was quite a mad environment in 1980s corporate law firm in Wall Street. But what I would do in the evenings is I would go out with my friend Emma down to the East Village and go and see mad bands. And suddenly New York, I thought, nobody knows my criminal record here. I could be anybody. I could be an Uzi-toting gangster. Nobody knows. And that the freedom of that, I started thinking, you know what, when I go back to Dublin, I am starting a band. And so I started the Fat Lady. I came back in the December of 1985. I started the Fat Lady Sings in March 1986 with one person I knew a little bit and two people I didn't really know at all. And in May 1986, I qualified as solicitor and to everybody's surprise and relief, gave up that day. And then in June 1986, I made the other three people in the band give up their day jobs and move to London with me. Wow. So that was all I did then for the next 10 years.
Shine like an arc light, sing like a Byrne might sing. When he was higher than heaven, higher than every other thing, some kind of art.
So that's the beginning of the story from a music point of view. Tell me then about the film and the creative side.
So the chronology of how I got to make films really is the chronology of me getting into advertising, which is that I came back from London after I split the band, and I tried to think what I could do. Qualified as a solicitor, I never worked as one, and I'd been in a rock band for 10 years. And while I was trying to get the rock band together, I'd done a little bit of journalism, and I just had lunch with a few people, and somebody said, who was in PR actually said, I think you'll hate PR, though I think you could probably get a job in it. Well, you should try to be a copywriter. And they picked up the phone to Mal Stevenson in Irish International, and they said, Mal, I'm going to quote I'll quote the person who said it. Rona Blake. She said, Mal, I've got this amazing man sitting in front of me, and you are an effing idiot if you don't hire him. And she hung up. And I thought, God, the way these people talk to each other is so mad. And I went in, and Mal, I mean, in fairness, Mal and Rona had worked together a lot, so but it was her way of saying, have a look at this guy. And he did have a look, and I went in for a day into II, and then I went in for 2 weeks because somebody was on holiday, and then I never left. And I just happened to go in at a time when I think Irish International was just starting to emerge from, they'd had a very tricky few years, but they were starting to suddenly gather pace. They had some incredible people in there. Catherine Donnelly was in there. Bill Felton was there. People who were at my level had never done a TV ad. But in my first 6 months, I ended up doing 2 or 3 TV ads because suddenly TV was there. Because I think also Ireland, it was the U2 effect and, you know, the football and all that. Ireland itself was starting to pick up steam, and your marketing was starting to pick up steam and budgets.
Do you remember your formative campaigns?
I remember the very first thing I wrote. It was for Hibernian Insurance, and I wrote a nursery rhyme. And to this day, can I say, if you are one of the thousands of clients who think around Christmas time that a rhyme is the thing, will you please hire me or another person who's written songs who can make it scan? I'm absolutely allergic to the rhymes that don't scan, which is almost all of them. But I wrote...
Can you remember the nursery rhyme? Can you
Jack and Jill went up a hill. They parked their car discreetly, alarmed, immobilised and safe, or so they thought, completely. And so it was Jack and Jill.
Yeah.
And they came back in their cars. And
is there more to it?
There is. When they returned to 5 o'clock, where Jackie Kirsten swore, something to them, but Jill said, Jack, it's not so black, it's not beyond endurance. For remember, lover, we are covered by Hibernian Insurance.
Lovely.
and then...
You're safe
in the hands of Hibernian.
One of the many genius end lines that Catherine Donnelly had come up with. So that was the first thing we did, and we won an ad effects for it years later. So,
how has I can see how the music might inform the creative, because you're writing lyrics and you're creating creative things. But I'm wondering, and you kind of referred to a little bit earlier, was there also the effect where your work in advertising also informed your music and film, even in terms of understanding how to market and promote what you're doing? Was there this kind of cross-pollination between the two?
I think I think all of the 3 bits. I had a weird thing for a while where I had 3 websites, and I was trying to sort of to keep my lives separate, because I thought, people because I think people jacks of all trades are very unattractive. Actually, I think people like experts.
Less so nowadays, I think.
Well, I'm hoping I'm coming into vogue, actually, because I'm a generalist. But I actually think they're all almost the same thing. I think music and film are literally the same thing. They are, their structure. We all speak a language of film, just like we all speak a language of pop music, where if there isn't a chorus after 50 seconds, where's our chorus? Or if after 10 minutes in a film, you don't know who your hero is, what their world is, and what their big problem is. If you don't know that, without even realizing it, you start to feel angry and resentful and bored. As a pop writer, you spend your whole life cutting lyrics and cutting cool bits of music because it's getting between you and the chorus, it's slowing it down. And that's really the same with film. And I think even things like visual writing. So this is a thing that, different songwriters are different, but a lot of songwriters, you only got a couple of 100 words in a song. So, picture, the old cliche about a picture is worth 1,000 words. So you're always looking to write a picture. So you're always looking for a noun or a picture, an itsy bitsy teeny weeny yellow polka dot bikini, or someone left a cake out in the rain, or like Moon River. That's 2 nouns that it catapults you. You are in Adland, then, all of those things, come through. I came into Adland, I think I had some tricks from music, and I also kind of understood what it was like to have, what gets popular, and sometimes the thing that cuts through, how to write a hook in a way. And I think I also had the experience of having marketing campaigns put around me and so on. So I kind of had a sense of that. But advertising gave me the best crash course in film, because I suddenly, as a copywriter, which you, by the way, as a screenwriter, you never get to do this. You choose the director. You go to all the castings. Like I cast Michael Fassbender in the Guinness ad. Anybody would have with a brain, but I was the only person in the room. You go to all the castings. You go to all the shoots. And I was on a shoot for Tom Crean, another Guinness ad, where I said to the line producer, I'd love to try directing someday. And he said, get me a script by next Wednesday. I took one of my 300 rejected Guinness scripts and tinkered it around a bit. And that was my first short film. So you learnt a lot by advertising is the best way to learn that trade. And I know I'm dodging about a bit, but one of the things about visual writing, because I think as an advertising creative, as you'll probably have understood by now, I'm an extremely talkative man. But actually, most of my ads, my first 4 ads for Guinness only have 1 word of dialogue between them, which is Michael Fassbender saying sorry.
One of the things in looking at, just having a look at some of the stuff that's on your website and your reel and your previous stuff, and one of the things that really struck me was what I'd call the word economy, where you were using so little to say so much. And there was one ad in particular I thought, and I don't know whether you were the copywriter on this, I know you were involved in it, but there's a Barry's Tea ad and there's like 4 words, and I have it here, I'll just play it to you.
That's amazing! It's Brooklyn, not Broadway. Don't forget your big sister when you're famous.
When I'm lonely, well, I know I'm gonna be the one who's lonely without you.
And in those 4 words, it's almost like you've said a whole mountain of stuff because you've gotten across the emotion. And I just thought, like, that's a 40-second ad. There's plenty of room for other copy. Is there something about understanding how you can just say so much in such a short period of time?
Well, I really think there is. I think the thing is, so actually I didn't write that ad, but I directed it. But I did cut the I worked with the copywriter and with the agency team, because I cut out a lot of stuff, because I said we need to say in the first 5 seconds, we need to understand exactly what this story is about. And we're going to have 35 seconds or 25 seconds probably. So in the first 3 seconds, actually, we need to set that up.
That's quite a skill to do that, and it's not often done very well, I don't think.
Well, it's, again, I think in music, it's I think that kind of,
so you're kind of thinking, get to the hook, or
I think you're always looking for a hook, and I think in film writing, even when you are writing dialogue, you think you come in, the rule is come in as late as possible and leave as early as possible. Like and my first feature film, The Drummer and the Keeper, I rewrote the script 24 times after we got the money to try and get it down to something you'd shoot for in 20 days for 350 grand. We shot, with all the input of actors and producers and Screen Ireland. We spent 4 months editing it, and I went to the first test screening 2 weeks before we locked picture. And just sitting in the room, I realised that we didn't need the first 6.5 minutes of the film. So the first opening scene of the film is, it's dawn on a beach and a man with no trousers is lugging a sofa out of the back of a hearse and dragging it across the sand and sets it on fire. Now, there are 6.5 minutes, which was in the cut until 2 weeks before, which tell you why he's got no trousers, why there's a sofa. It tells you a lot of stuff. But in the room, I realised nobody cared about that. That 6.5 minutes was slowing us down to get to the most important relationship between this guy, who is a dude with a problem, and the person who will be the other dude who also has a problem, but the two of them will heal each other. And I just realised, man with no trousers, hauling a sofa out of the back of a hearse at dawn onto a beach and setting it afire, is a dude with a problem. You don't have to know much about that problem.
And so that's never resolved for the audience. That's just left open.
Nobody's ever asked me it at any Q&A. Nobody's ever asked me, why does he have no trousers on? Because he's actually bipolar with delusional episodes. But we find that out as we go on. Yeah. But
it allows them to imagine why he might be, which is just as powerful, I presume.
I think the thing is, as a songwriter, you kill your own children so often that by the time you get to Adland, I think my absolute superpower is rejection. Actually, I've had so much rejection in my life, and I literally don't even notice it. Like, I get letters from people all the time or emails saying, listen, thank you so much for submitting. Before I get, honestly, after the subject line and one line of the text, I'm over it. So I wrote 5 ads for Guinness, which were produced, and I'm really, really proud of them. To do that, I wrote, working with, art directors, over 300 scripts for Guinness. And some of those scripts were absolutely, one of them turned into my first short film. Another few of them are some of my favourite. I would still pitch them to Guinness today if they were allowed to make ads like that.
So that's where we'll leave part 1 of our interview with Nick Kelly as part of the creative series. I also want to give a nod to Una Herlihy from the Indie List, who suggested Nick Kelly to me. And there will be more from that interview on next week's pod. Here's a little preview for you.
It was sort of before crowdfunding was really a thing. Google actually had me come in and talk to them about how I had managed to get 300 people, 50% out of a direct marketing thing. But I know a lot of people in advertising who've died of dignity poisoning. Advertising doesn't own you. Advertising is borrowing you. The best people I know are either restlessly on their way in, or they're restlessly on their way out, or they're dipping in and out.
If you are enjoying the podcast, then please follow, like and subscribe on any of our platforms. Details will be in the show notes. That's everything for today. The Irish Marketing Podcast is recorded, edited and mixed at Tin Pot Production Studios. We're back next Friday, wherever you pick your pods, and thanks for listening.